few tools over here. So one is this tweezers. So there are different kind of tweezers. For electronics, you want to use the ones that have like these really sharp tips. So there's a good video by Dua, so you remember probably from the bootcamp week, so which goes over these kind of details. So I would recommend you to watch it again. So you will need also like this bride, so to remove excess solder sometimes. And then of course solder. So this is pretty much a good one. So if you really are into details, then you can check the labels on it in order to learn everything about what is in it. Fab Academy. .org.
May I ask how long do you need?
Like 20 minutes.
Okay.
And 2021 schedule, electronics production. So we go to insert the programmer, and then here we have the boards, the board and the components. So here we can map the actual components that we need. So we need the FT230 chip, and of course, like we need also the actual board itself. So I have milled this beforehand, so that we can actually just use it for this demonstration. And we have all these components that you can find there in the rack. So I'm probably not going to manage to solder all of those. I'm going to show you how to solder the main chip. And I'm going to show you how to 230. FT stands for Future Technology. So it's like a big corporation which does microchips, and I think this might be their most popular one.
Future technology.
Yeah, Future Technology Incorporated. It's like Limburger
like
style.
From a movie.
And yeah, here you see. So the microscope is a really nice thing to have in order to check, how your boards actually came out. So you can see it's really in the detail of it. So these chips, usually the critical thing is alignment. So you see that it has this little dot over here. So you need to make sure that this dot is actually aligned correctly. Better. So you see that this dot is actually positioned in the upper left corner. So we want to align the board approximately like this. And you can also look into this. So that's gonna be the trickiest part, and if your hands are really too shaky, then you can go also with the simpler version. But I would be really happy that you managed to make this. But if you can't make it, and you also don't want to have the simple version, then we can collaborate. I can help you with the.
Like that's the size of like a fly, or even smaller. Like you don't get the scale when you look at the image. Of course, well, you see the clippers, but when you like actually see the chip in context, it's like so small.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah.
But you can do it. So it's possible. So
Yeah,
next thing
right
is
attitude,
soldering iron. So here for this micro soldering iron under microscope, I use one of the mobile ones. Unfortunately, it is so that this is the last one left. So be careful.
Okay.
When you hit the left button, then it's gonna start going to the target temperature, and you can set the target temperature hitting to the holding down the like 320 degrees. It's good for SMD soldering anyways.
Okay.
Then the sponge has to be wet so that you can, when you touch it with the soldering iron, you should hear like sound.
Yeah.
This, and you should make sure that the solder melts, so you can this solder thread over here, maybe move the board a little bit aside, and then try to melt a little bit of solder. So as yesterday also in the video, you want to have a little bit of solder on the tip of it and then clear it off like so.
I soldered before, but I haven't soldered that small stuff.
Yeah, and the trick with soldering these is that what do you want to do? You want to solder the corners first, and in order to do so, you want to apply solder on one of the pads first, like a tiny bit of solder. So I'm gonna take a little bit of solder on the tip of this, and also one more thing before I do that. It's a good idea to use flux. So we store the flux pen over here. So what you want to do is you want to make all the pads that you're going to solder wet with the flux. As you'll see many videos on YouTube where people say that the flux is never too much. So what it basically does when it heats up, it cleans the pads, and it makes the solder flow much nicer, much better. So let's proceed. These masks are there making things even more trickier because everything gets foggy. So so you want to put a little bit of solder onto the pad like this.
Oh.
And a little bit of solder here on the last pad as well. And the next thing is that you're going to position this very carefully.
You wouldn't believe how fast you learn. Both sides okay? Only one side. One side correct or both sides? Sorry? Which side is correct?
So you want to position it, then you want to stop breathing for a minute, and then you
Well, that's a good idea.
Because you have to
stop breathing, then you release, and it sticks. And you want to also tack the other corner.
Yeah.
So you want to touch this, and yeah, it's now tacked.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. There are many ways how to proceed. So
Make a wish.
so the way I prefer to do it, I like to kind of go in between these pads, like in between these leads, and touch it like briefly with this. So this is fine. So don't worry about this. You can fix it later.
Okay.
This is fine.
I guess I'll melt all of them together.
Also, you can do like this.
Really together.
Yeah, that's no worries about that.
Okay.
So you can.
Yeah. Oh, it's smaller. It behaves so much different than in larger. And when there's flux, like kind of sticks to those.
Yeah, and then you can use the braid.
But yeah, you have to use that one.
Yeah, okay, you have to.
Take off the
Yeah.
otherwise it's sharpened.
Yeah, that would be
Cut
my
off
like
the
fine.
only used one.
It's gonna
It
happen
doesn't
the first few times anyway. So.
Yeah, I did a
I'll
lot of
turn it
stupid
so
things
that
in
it's
my
easier to
hard
access.
electric car.
And so you want to put it closer over here, and then you want to and you see it removes it really nicely. All the leftover solder is gone.
Yeah.
A little bit more.
How does it work?
You want to cut off the part that is already full with solder.
Okay. Weird. So it like doesn't heat the legs too much, so it sticks only to the braid. But when you remove it like that, it doesn't remove the.
Actually,
There was a trick that Neil suggested, that you put a little bit of extra solder so the tip of the soldering iron. You actually move it in so the solder melts into the connection, and then
because you just need to heat any metal part and it goes into the solder, so you don't need to be exact on the line.
Yeah, because it's connected.
It's all connected. So
Yeah.
just need to touch.
now we're good. Okay, so
As long as you get the
and let's get the other side going.
Exactly. That's the most.
I feel like there should be some weight.
I put this what do you call
Ah
it?
man,
Yeah, this thing that is sculpted.
Yeah,
I put it.
press.
Yeah, I close it and I press it on top of the.
Yeah.
To hold it.
Okay.
But I hold it so that there is some room to move. But for me, the microscope is not ideal for this. For me,
You have good eyes.
or I can see with that magnifier.
Yeah.
You should be able to see.
I will get glasses even for CO2 sort.
yeah, I can't see anything without a microscope.
Because this is the problem with coordination for me.
Ah, yeah.
Yes.
What you do now, what you do.
Yeah. It's like VR.
Okay, and this is how you do it. So it's probably gonna take several attempts for you. Yeah, the tricky part, like the one thing that has happened with me with this one is that these pads were not connected well enough. So that's one possibility that can happen. So it is good to use the multimeter afterwards. So which we're gonna cover later. So all the test equipment and so on to check the connections. You're gonna probably do this during the week anyway. So you're gonna try to make this, and we're gonna test your boards and debug them also. So I'm gonna be here on Monday, and yeah, I'm gonna be here tomorrow as well. So if you want to start doing this tomorrow, so the sooner the better. So I assume that one day should be enough for you to mill the board and actually try to attempt to solder it the first time. Yeah, and then there are the other components which are supposedly easier to solder. So I'm gonna start with this resistor over here. You see, it's like 49R9, so it's 49.9. So if you go to the two resistors that are for the USB connection, the D plus and D minus, they require this 49 ohm resistor. So we don't have exactly 49, but we have 49.9, so which is 0.50. So you can go with that. And yeah, like they seem big here under the microscope, but they are actually quite small. So if you look, but the way how you solder these, so it's similar. So you need add flux. And the cool thing about resistors and also like these ceramic capacitors, I'm gonna bring in a ceramic capacitor. So this one is 1 microfarad. So this will go here. So they you do not have to worry about polarity. So you can, it doesn't matter whether it goes like this or, the other way around.
Yeah.
So like this. So that's the good thing about these programmers. So these are really basic set of parts, and you don't need to. There are not so many things to really sort of say where you can make mistakes, except this chip here. So you can flip it around and position it wrong, and then the soldering of this is tricky. But I really suggest you to go through this process and like suffer a little bit and then succeed. It's gonna feel good, I promise. And how you do this is, you apply a little bit of flux on the pads. I did that already, I think. And then what you do is you apply a tiny bit of solder on one of the pads. You start heating the pad and you touch it with the solder wire. You see the solder flows like this. Then you put the resistor on. And so you maybe want to hold it down a little bit with the tweezers so it doesn't move. And you touch here and here with the soldering iron for a few seconds. And so now it's in place, so now it doesn't move. So you can flip this around. And so hold your solder wire prepared. Put the soldering iron in between the pad and the connection, and then move in the solder. Go, and then you see the solder flows. Then you remove the soldering iron and let it cool down. And then, as the last step, is you fix this connection. You put the soldering iron and then apply the solder, just to add a little bit of solder. So now it's really nicely in place. I think this is it. So these are the basics. I'm gonna probably just stay here and finish soldering the rest of the components and make sure it works. One thing that for these boards, which is going to be important, is to remove this extra copper around, because if you're gonna put it in your USB ports like this, then everything is gonna be shorted. So you see all this copper, it kind of connects together. Even though these are separated, but this thing around, like so this copper line over here, this is what you would like to remove. So in order to do that, introducing scalpel, and you just
Scratch it away.
you just scrape it off, just like that.
Why it's black?
It's not like a really
I
sharp
think,
scalpel. Yeah, that's that.